read between the lines when they getting out of place. Help me run this marathon. Help me run to keep my pace. Holy Father, please forgive me, cause you know I make mistakes. Help me when I feel condemned. Help me know that's not the case. Lord, I need you.
What's good, y'all? Welcome to the Substitute Preacher Podcast. I'm your host, Isaiah Johnson, aka the Substitute Preacher. Get to work. That's the series we just got into. Last episode was the first one of the series, and I talked about basically my career thus far, all of my jobs, went over a few of the details, why I got into that job, why I was interested, maybe why I left, and what's brought me to this point here as a substitute teacher. And I even gave a hint about what I'm looking for in my next job. This episode I'm so excited about. It's been circled on the calendar for some time now. I will be talking about resumes. In addition, cover letters, references, obviously those things go hand in hand. And if you're unfamiliar with those, I'll break it down for you. And yeah, let's get you ready to interview and get into your next job opportunity. So I'm really excited about that. Just gonna do my best to offer my expertise and give you some advice that'll put you in a position to hopefully get the next job you're looking for and really succeed in it from there. Before I go any further, if you feel like you're gonna enjoy this series or you're in that process of looking for a new job or a new career, please hit that subscribe button. It means a lot. Your support is really what keeps me going, and you're why I do this show. So subscribe, share with a friend who might be looking for work, and let's just keep the ball rolling. So I mentioned my first job out of college that I thought would be my career. I was a recruiter at Aerotech, and Aerotech does staffing. So big companies like Tesla will have a whole bunch of positions they're looking to fill, they're looking to hire, and they'll work with a third party staffing company like Aerotech and basically say, Aerotech, here's what we're looking for. We have these jobs we got to fill by this deadline. Find us the people. And so as a recruiter, it was my job I would get the jobs across my desk. Okay, they're looking for a warehouse person, an electrician, and a manager. And I have to find these jobs. Here's the job description. Let's go. And so they had a database. So all these people who we've come in contact with in the past, and I'd put together a call sheet based on what I was looking for. I'd put it all in the system, and I'd start going away with calls. Now, that was a great way to go about it because, one, some of those people maybe are now looking for work. They have some history with the company, and so it was a great place to start. But from there, you end up running out of people, or they're not answering the phone. And so I had to come up with different ways to try and find someone. I'd have to think out of the box, and so I'd put up job postings on Indeed, or I'd go to a trade school and leave flyers, leave my business cards, and stuff like that to be able to find these people. As far as the process goes, so once I would get a hold of someone and they sounded like a promising candidate, they were maybe looking for work, mutual interest, I would phone screen them and have that conversation, and then I would try and get them in for an internal interview. Now, this was key. This was crucial because people sound different on the phone than in person. And so I may have a candidate, I'm like, oh, this the one, they're perfect. And then they come in person and they're not dressed for the part, or in person they're not as respectful, and they may not know how to act. And so that was part of the job I enjoyed too, is there's an opportunity to coach them up and to maybe give them some advice on how to clean it up a little bit, and then potentially we can send them to the employer. So it was a lot of fun, the process. Met all types of people. Some of the people I'm like, hey, from the rip, there's no shot I'm working with this person. because at the end of the day, they represent me, and my reputation is on the line. So, with all due respect, hey, you're a great person. I wish you best of luck, but we can't work together. And I had to have those tough conversations sometimes. Other times, I met people. It's like, hey, I'm trying to. We gotta kick it. We gotta. Hey, I'm gonna try and get you a job, and then we gotta go hoop, or we gotta play video games, whatever. Like I met some really cool, down to earth people as well. So you see everything, and it was part of a great experience there. We did all that, and then we would check references to validate their character, their work ethic, and yeah, especially for my younger audience. If you don't know what references are, all employers, at least any decent one, is gonna ask you for references so they can have an idea of what you work like, and if you're worth being a part of their team. Anyone could talk the talk and say, oh yeah, I did this and that, oh, I'm a great worker. But you might talk to that reference and they're like, hey, they're late every day, they have a poor work ethic, bad attitude. Of course, they're not going to show that over the phone or in an interview, but once they get on the job, eventually their true self will come out. So I had some tough conversations doing reference checks as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about them later in the show. But yeah, you see a little bit of everything doing reference checks. They're like, nah, that person was horrible. I even had one once where a dude was like, it was for a manager position in a warehouse. And I called the reference, and he was like, "Nah, dude's a horrible worker. But hey, what you got for me? Like, hey, I'm the supervisor. What's up?" And I actually ended up getting him a job. So you never know what you're gonna get on those calls. So all of that gets done on the front end, and meanwhile, you haven't interviewed, and the candidate, yeah, they're in the loop, but it really means nothing in terms of getting the job. And that's why a lot of people, they overlook it, but that whole kind of first initial part of the process, it's all about preparation. And if you can come up with a good resume and show that you're buttoned up, you're polished, you're fit for the job, at least you give yourself a chance. Because what happens is employers, they get on these job boards, and if you don't know what a job board is, it's Indeed or Glassdoor, where employers or companies, they'll post the jobs that they have open and the jobs they're looking for, and it'll list the requirements that you need to get the job, what they're looking for in a candidate. They'll post what the job entails and the experience they're looking for, what you'll be doing on the job, pay, benefits, and other potential perks within the company. So that way you have an idea of what you're getting into, and they're not wasting their time either. They're not getting people applying who don't have the right experience. So job boards are a great tool to use if you're looking and trying to find a job. Back in the day, people would print out a resume and walk into a business and ask for the hiring manager and personally hand it to them, and manager would give them a business card and, hey, I'll call you if you're a fit, and we'll look at interviews and go from there. Now it's less face to face, and it's more, hey, we'll do a Zoom call, or just send me your resume online. Don't even get to see the person yet. And that's just the day and age we live in. So in your first, technically, the resume is usually going to be the first interaction, the first, that first meeting, the first impression. You want to make a good impression. And so the better your resume can look, you're only giving yourself a chance to get your foot in the door and get an interview. Because once you get the interview, you're one step closer. You're right there. Before I get into really the specifics of resumes and references, cover letters, which is what we're going to be talking about, a couple rules of thumb. One, you want to know what you're getting into. So make sure that you're a match. Make sure that, like I said, you're not wasting the employer's time, and they're not going to waste your time. So see what the job entails. Make sure you're a fit, and then go from there. If you are, in fact, a fit, then let's get it. Put that resume together, and you want to make it match. You want it to line up with what the company's looking for. You could be the perfect, ideal candidate, and you're perfect for the job. But if your resume stinks, they'll never know, and they probably won't give you a chance. So that's how important this is. And so I know, like, I have former coworkers who I worked with at Aerotech, and they ended up doing resumes for people. They would sell them basically. And so if you need a resume, they DM them, hey, here's my experience. Can you do me a resume? And you send them a little something, and they put it together for you. They make it look nice, and they're professionals, so you can definitely trust people doing that. I want to save you some money though. Don't do it just yet. Hear what I have to say, and hopefully some of these tips can save you some money and you could do it all by yourself. Now, keep in mind, like, for example, my industry that I focused on when I was a recruiter was warehouse and distribution, manufacturing, jobs like that. Now, I did work with some big time electricians and mechanics and people making the big bucks, but a lot of my jobs were lower level, and so people didn't have to be as buttoned up. They're working with their hands, and it might be more manual type labor. So half the time they didn't even really need a resume, because it's not as big a deal. But the more higher up you go, if you're in business or in tech, that resume better look sharp. So anyone could get advice from this video. It's some quality stuff, but if you're kind of one of them in one of them industries and you need a resume, it's probably going to have to be a little bit more intense than what I'm suggesting, and it's going to have to be more technical. So keep that in mind. But just from a general standpoint, this advice is good for anyone. Another thing that's really important when it comes to resumes is, one, you never want to lie. And obviously that just should go without saying, but some people might be nervous, like, oh, they're asking for this, I'm gonna just lie and say I have it. Eventually, 99% of the time, you'll get exposed, and you're just gonna look worse than when you started. And reputation, it's huge. It's something you want to protect. If you just go around from job to job lying, or you get the job and then you do a bad job and you lie about your references, eventually the world is so small and you're going to get exposed. So don't let that be you. Don't lie. That being said, you don't always have to tell the truth. And what do I mean by that? There may be something that doesn't quite enhance your profile, your resume. Doesn't mean you have to put it on. Don't lie, and don't go twisting it and say you didn't do it. Just don't put it on. It's that simple. All right, so with that being said, I just want to break down what a resume is, what it should look like, and how it can benefit you in your search for your next job. So, for starters, what is a resume? A resume is basically an outline of your work experience. So, and you'll see my resume in just a second, but last episode I talked about all my work experience. If I were to put the dates down and type it all out, that would basically be my resume. It's all about you. So what should be on it? For starters, obviously your name. You want to have your name, your information, so that the job, if they're interested, they could get a hold of you. And so that stuff includes your phone number, your email. Your address is optional. I mean, some industries may seek that or require it depending on their interview process. Typically, if you just put the city and state that you live, that's good enough. So that's fine. And then from there, now this is optional, but it always helps if you put like your skills, your accomplishments or accolades, your certifications, especially if the company is looking for specific type things. Me, for example, as a personal trainer, oftentimes if I was going to apply and try and be a trainer at a gym or with an athletic program, they typically seek some type of certification, a personal training certification, whether it's through NASM, which is what I had, or ACE, or one of the other ones. So if I put that in my resume, off the rip, they know, okay, he has this. Let's check this box. He's good. Versus if they look on the resume and they don't see that, it's going to worsen my chances of getting the job because they're looking for a specific thing. Without that qualification, that if that's a requirement for them and I don't have it, I'm not going to be able to work there. I don't know the exact stat, and you can research this, but they have a stat out there for how long an employer looks at a resume, and it's probably only a few seconds, 2 or 3 seconds. Like they'll see, and they're looking for certain things. Maybe it's what city you live in, because they want to make sure you can get to work reliably and on time. Maybe it's the first job or two. Okay, they worked here. Is this relevant experience? And then they're looking at dates. How long did they work here? Oh, they have 8 years experience. Or, oh, they've only been there for 6 months. That's so critical. And if your resume isn't accurate, or if it's just all over the place, even the formatting, which I'll briefly touch on in a second, if that stuff's off, they'll just cross you off the list and it's on to the next one. So if you can save yourself and make the formatting really good and make it look nice and make sure everything's accurate and in the right place, you're giving yourself at least a better chance to be considered. One more quick thing on the skills and the accomplishments. Again, it's not a necessity. However, you have to be smart about it. If you're going to do that stuff, like if you're seeking a job in sales, you want to highlight the experience that is going to be relatable to sales. So, for example, customer service, phone calls, answering calls, anything that's going to make you look like you can potentially be a good salesman. If you're switching careers and you formerly did manual labor and you're putting all your skills in the warehouse on the resume under skills, it defeats the point. They're going to say, oh, we're looking for a salesman, not a warehouse worker, and they'll eliminate you. So keep that in mind too. There's a strategic approach that you need in order to build that resume. All right, formatting. I think the biggest thing here, especially if it's just more of an entry-level type job or a more basic job, the formatting, it's not going to be a big deal. Again, do your research. If you're in a tech or it's a managerial position or business, then maybe you want to see, okay, what format should I use? But otherwise, I think the biggest thing is that it's consistent. You want the font size in each category kind of the same way. You want everything spaced out the same, and that way it looks clean. And I could see it, and that's not a red flag. Like, oh, they just threw this together at midnight last night and submitted it. Oh, they actually took some time and built it out. That's what employers want to know. For example, the font, right? The font, you want maybe the job title or the company in bold because that's what they're looking for. So make that bold, and then I like to do the dates on the other side and have the dates in bold, and that way they know how long I was there. So your position and title are also really important. So having those italicized or in bold, making sure that they stand out so the employer will see, okay, we're looking for an electrician. Oh, they were an electrician. Perfect. I'm not wasting my time. This is a potential candidate. And then they'll go on from there. Another thing that's important too is you want to go in reverse chronological order. And what that means is you start with the most recent job. If you're still in the job, then put current and go from there. Then I'll go with my second most recent job, third, so on and so forth. And again, that goes to, if you put the most recent stuff, that's the most significant. And that's kind of what they're basing it off of. If they're looking for an electrician and you were an electrician 20 years ago, and now you've been doing customer service this whole time, chances are they're not going to be as interested. Another thing, so let's say, for example, myself, I'm a substitute teacher. I'm still doing it. I haven't quit. I haven't been fired. I want to put current. The tasks and responsibilities that I list under that job need to be in the current tense. And what does that mean? Hopefully you guys know this. If you don't, past versus present tense, right? Past tense, I want to use words that are going to reflect that. So served or installed, conducted, called. Notice these are all past tense. If it's my most recent job and it's under present or current, then I want to use present tense. It has to be consistent, and I want it to match. So in that case, it would be install, perform, conduct, serve. Notice there's no ed at the end. So if you have trouble with that, which I pray you don't, pay attention in school. But if you do, make sure you have someone look it over so it's consistent. If the first thing they notice is it's all over the place and it's a past tense job, but you're speaking as if it's current, that's just a bad look. They won't think you're intelligent enough for the job, plain and simple. All right, so we got all that out the way. So the company, you have your job title, you have the dates, months are okay, you don't need the exact date, and if it's estimated, that's fine. It doesn't have to be exact. The years are probably what's the most important. From there, now it's about the actual meat of the resume. And what's that? That's what you actually did. That's what's most important. Even though the looks and the optics, all that is great. And that's what's going to keep them engaged and keep them looking and reading without just disregarding your stuff. But yeah, that's what they're really trying to read and get to. It's really important that you're specific when you list your tasks and responsibilities. You want to speak quantifiably when necessary. And what do I mean by that? If you did sales, you want to put specific numbers. Don't just put partook in cold calls daily. Put something like conducted 50 to 100 cold calls on a daily basis. What's the difference? Using specific numbers, it stands out. It's more impressive. If you're just vague, everyone's resume is going to be just kind of vague and say what they did. But if you're specific, it's like, wow, okay, they did a lot. If you made a certain amount of sales per month and you track that, again, we don't want to lie, but if you track that, I would definitely throw that in there. If it's a manager type role or a supervisor position, in your experience, how many people did you have under you? How many teams were you on? That stuff is going to stand out. The other thing is types of systems you've used or softwares. We'll go with the sales example again. If you have experience with Salesforce or if you used another database and you put that in there, it's going to stand out. Especially, again, if you have the job description and they say they're looking for a specific thing and you put that exact thing on your resume, bam, it's a match made in heaven. They're going to see that and they're going to want to interview you. So that's so important there. Now some stuff, obviously, some tasks it might not be necessary. Or if your numbers weren't that staggering or impressive, yeah, I wouldn't put it down. But you want to be as specific as possible and make your resume stand out. A question some people might have is, how much should I put? How much should I list? Which is a good question, and it varies. But what I will say is, typically you don't want your resume exceeding a page. So you want to make it fitting to where it can be a page. Obviously put the most important stuff. And the most important stuff at the top, and as you go down, go in from best to worst. Because they start at the top, and that's where they read, and then they go down. So you want to stand out as much as possible at the top. 5 to 6 bullet points minimum, I would suggest. with maybe 3 of the most impressive things you did, and then 3 additional things that might be secondary to your job, whether it's upkeeping with the cleanliness of the facility or something of that nature where, yeah, it's part of the job. I'm doing it because I'm a good worker. I don't really have to do it, but let me put this on because I take care of business. I do the big stuff, but I also do some of the little things as well. So play it by ear. You want it to fit one page. So if you have just 2 jobs with most of your experience that cover a 10-year span, awesome. Put those 2 jobs and put a bunch of bullet points. I'm sure there's a bunch of things you did. Make it fit a page and you're golden. But if you've had 4 jobs in the past couple years and that's going to cover 2 pages, you might want to shrink down, again, highlight the most important things and then kind of fill it in from there. And that brings me to kind of my last point when it comes to resumes, which is red flags and the eliminators that hiring managers are looking for on a resume. Just one little thing and they're like, oh, nope, on to the next one. And one of them is, we used to call it jumpiness. They're jumpy. It's a jumpy resume. And that means in the past 18 months, you've had 6 jobs. Like, you can't hold on to a job. You're bouncing around. What does that suggest? Well, that you're probably not a good worker. You're at a job, you get fired, and you're on to the next one. Get fired, on to the next one. Or you don't really have a good work ethic. Any adversity comes and you quit. Oh, this job ain't for me. I'm going to quit again instead of sticking it out. That's why it's crucial when considering leaving a job. How is it going to reflect on my resume? Because that's stuff you can't lie about. When they do the reference check, your former manager is probably going to tell the truth and say, oh, they were only here 6 weeks and then they left. And that doesn't look good. Another red flag and kind of similar concept is having gaps in your resume. So maybe you were at a job for a couple years or however long, but then something happened and they looked to the next date and you didn't start your next job for another 8 months. What does that show? That shows either maybe you were lazy or because your references said you weren't a good worker and so you couldn't land another job. And so that's something that's dangerous. Now, is it always your fault? Not necessarily. And the same thing with the jumpiness on the resume. Sometimes it's just there's legitimate excuses. But in general, if I'm the employer, I'm gonna shy away from resumes that are jumpy and that have huge gaps. Other ones we've talked about, but other red flags is the formatting. If it's all over the place, that's a red flag. It's like, oh, they don't really care about their work. They don't put in the time to do a good job. So that's not good. Spelling errors or just little mistakes here and there, it's not going to look good. So always proofread your resume. If you didn't pay attention in school and can't do some of that yourself, have a friend read it and make sure you're all squared away. So those are the basics when it comes to resumes, but chances are in middle school, high school, you're not learning these things, so maybe you don't know them. If you have any additional questions or you're curious about something or maybe want me to go into more detail, please comment below and I can answer those questions. Someone else can. In my next few shows, I'll have, like I said, specific guests from specific industries. And so if you have a question that's more relatable to sales or to law enforcement or whatever type job, ask me and I can ask my guest on the show and make sure that you're 100 and you're all good with your question. All right, I'm going to breeze through these last 2. My wife is texting me. She's hungry. My daughter's in there crying because she can't have a granola bar. So let me wrap this thing up. But anyways, that's resumes. So let me know if you have further questions. DM me on Instagram or in the comments. We'll be sure to answer them. Cover letters. Now, cover letters are becoming more common, why are cover letters beneficial to the hiring manager? Well, and to you as well as the potential employee. They're important because everything that the resume can't answer or can't show, a cover letter can answer such questions. So, for example, if you have a huge gap in your resume, but you have a legitimate reason, maybe you were really sick and it kept you out of work for months. There's not really a good way you could put that on a resume, but in a cover letter, you can mention that. And it'll at least give the hiring manager more confidence in bringing you in for an interview. And so, what is the purpose of a cover letter? A cover letter is basically you writing to the company why you're interested in the job, possibly what some of your goals are, and how you can be an asset for them, why they should want to hire you. It's also a chance for you to show your knowledge of the position, the company, just to make yourself look better. And then, like I alluded to earlier, it's a chance to explain any red flags on the resume and kind of put everything together. It's the glue for your candidate profile for the job. If I'm being transparent, I hardly used cover letters for my candidates when I was a recruiter. Again, the industry I worked on didn't really call for it, generally speaking. I may have had 4 or 5 cover letters in the couple years I was with Aerotech that I looked over and that we had sent with the resume. And like I said, it's just a different industry. Jobs in business or in maybe customer service, administrative jobs, those type of jobs where they expect you to be a little more buttoned up, you're going to want to have a cover letter. And so, like I said, I won't go too in detail just for time and because of the fact that I didn't really work on them as much. Now I have created my own cover letters for jobs that I applied to, but if I'm being honest, I just typed in on Google cover letter, and then I steal a format. There's a whole bunch out there, cover letter examples, and you look, make sure everything's formatted. Same rules apply with the resume. Make sure everything's formatted properly. You start with Dear Hiring Manager, or if you know their name, you put their name. Format it like an actual letter. It is a letter. So hopefully they taught you how to do letters in school. If not, ChatGPT or Google will let you know. And yeah, I would go off that. I don't want to leave y'all with just that. Let me see. So how I like to start them personally, just my preference. I'll start with a paragraph on why I'm interested in the position and just kind of highlight what I know about their company, their reputation. And then the next paragraph, I'll get into my work experience and just kind of, again, recap my resume. But I want to string it together with some of my goals and offer reasoning as to why I want this position. Make it all make sense. It's a puzzle. So I'm just putting all the pieces together. And then the final paragraph, I like to talk a little bit more in depth on goals and long term and how I think I'll be a match with the company. And then typically I'll wrap it up and finish with some gratitude. I appreciate you guys considering me. I feel like I'm a great fit for the position and you guys are a great fit for me. Hopefully I get a chance to interview. Hopefully I get a chance to interview with you guys in person. And bam, that's it. Sincerely, Isaiah Johnson. So that's kind of how I do it. But again, see online, see what's out there, see what your specific industry or job type might be looking for, and go from there. Lastly, references. References are done differently. Most companies that I've seen, and in probably 80% of the interviews I've been on, they ask for references after you actually get the job. Some companies like to get ahead of it, and so they'll ask for them maybe before the interview or right after the interview. They'll make those calls, and if they're all good, then they'll look to hire you. So it just depends. Like I said, with staffing companies, when I worked there, it was all about reputation. And so we did reference checks for the company, but we did it before we sent them to interview because, again, if they could talk the talk, but if they're in fact a bad worker and their previous coworkers or managers mention that, then it's just going to be all bad. References, relationships. References, relationships. That's what it's about. Forget being a good worker or a great worker, which is really important. Being just a good person, representing yourself well, whatever your job, is going to be so important. It's so essential to not only the job you're in, but the next job. Because if you can leave a good impression, people will go out of their way to do a reference or write you a letter of recommendation. So that's so important. Generally speaking, when an employer is doing reference checks, they want to speak to a manager or supervisor because your peers or your friends at your job, obviously they're only going to speak highly of you. Managers, supervisors, your lead, they're going to keep it real. And they have an expectation and they can answer whether or not you were reaching those expectations. So that's pretty simple. You also want to make sure that whoever your reference is, because usually you'll just write them down or you'll email them and they'll ask for the name and the number or the email. Make sure that you tell the person in advance. You want them to know. If they're just blindsided and get the call, who knows, maybe they won't be as generous or they won't be as open to speak only good about you. And of course, you want them to be honest too, but if they're just blindsided, chances are they're just going to speak what's on their mind versus if they're prepared and they know, hey, so-and-so, you're going to be getting a call. I listed you as a reference. Is that okay? Oh, of course. Yeah, I can't wait. And then they get the person on the phone. They already have it planned out. Oh, I'm going to say they were organized. They were always on time. They were a really great worker. So don't blindside them. Give them a heads up. It's important too that you tell them what the job entails. That way, hopefully they understand the position a little bit and they can speak to how your experience aligns with it. So trust me, a reference can make or break you. As I said earlier, don't lie, don't make up a reference or have your friend, hey, I'm going to list you as a reference, and then they call the friend and the friend has no idea what they're talking about. And they're asking questions about your job and your friend didn't even work with you there, and now they're rambling and making stuff up. It's just going to make you look like a liar and they're not going to want to hire you. I actually recently got approached by one of my students about being a reference for her in the future, and I was excited. I was like, oh yeah, of course. And so she asked for my info, sent it, and I'm only going to say great things about her. Her name's Jayla. So shout out to Jayla, really good student. And yeah, I'm going to put all that stuff down. Lastly, as I just bring this thing to a close, for students still in high school, it's not too early to get a jump on this stuff. So if you have a good relationship with a principal or a teacher, asking them to be a reference or to write you a letter of recommendation, a coach, it's only going to work well for you, whether it's for you getting into college or if you're just going to jump right into work. It's only going to help the process, I promise you. And with that, guys, that resumes, cover letters, references, they may never be perfect, but you just want to give yourself a chance. That's what it's all about. I've done jobs, for example, and actually I forgot to talk about this job last episode, but I was an English instructor for the Stockton Ports baseball team. It's a minor league baseball team, the affiliate of the Oakland A's actually. I seen the job posting and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I just applied. I didn't even really know fully what it was, but I applied, and to my knowledge, it wasn't even like they were really looking for someone who was an English instructor. They were looking for qualities and certain traits that a potential person might have. Like me, for example, coaching. And so I listed on my resume how many kids were under me as a coach, what I specifically coached, what that looked like. Watching film, breaking it down, scouting opponents, and that whole preparation behind it made me look like a really good candidate for a whole different type of job. So don't limit yourself either. If you're unsure of what you're going to do it. Build out your resume and go on Indeed and see what comes up. You never know. But you have to also make sure that with each job, You may want to change up your resume. You may switch it up to match specifically what the job has to offer. So that's really important too. And then obviously the cover letter, that is specific to an actual company and job. You don't want to just have a generic cover letter and that you send to every job, because it has to be specific. The more specific, the better. So guys, I encourage you guys, get out there. Don't limit yourself. Get the best experience you can. Leave a good impression. If it's not the job you're going to be at for 20, 30 years, that's okay. Take something from each job. So take the experience. Each new job and experience is just more stuff you can add to your resume to make it look better. And it's more people that you can impact that'll vouch for you as future references on a reference check for your dream job. So keep that in mind. Big picture, guys. And with that, I'm going to just say a quick prayer. Father God, I pray for anyone out there searching for a job, searching for a career, whatever their status is. You know what it is, God. Help them to have faith. And even if their next job is just a stepping stone for their dream, help them to understand that. Give them peace and help them to do their best at whatever comes their way. I thank you, God. In Jesus' name, amen. Peace out.
Lord, I'm helpless, I can't